So, after quite a bit of talking, perhaps we can look at this slide and just see what is sort of the issues in terms of just buying an antenna based perhaps on price and specifications that seem to be the same. I think one of the problems, and I've highlighted some of these, is that the testing complexity means that a customer or reseller have difficulty in assessing all of the things that sits on a specification sheet, and as I've explained, a lot of them could be misleading, could be false, etc. So in a sense, there has to be a trust that you have to rely on the manufacturer's design and specifications. Of course, all of this, especially the ones that happen down the line, year or two, affects reseller reputation, whoever product supplier. If things start falling apart later, people are not going to say, oh, we're sorry that you didn't see that. They're going to be entirely unhappy about it. And I think I tried to highlight some of this, but antennas should be designed addressing all of the functional imperatives which the user don't even know about. What I'm really trying to say, you want these little things that I've pointed out in some of the earlier slides to be addressed by the designers, because they need to understand what these things are going to be used for. And if they interact closely with customers, we find much of what we put into our designs have been put in because of cooperation with our customers. But often you virtually can't even put it on a spec sheet, or it doesn't make the specification look better. It just means that many of those hidden pitfalls are avoided, and in a sense you can trust that the things have been designed to do what they're designed to be used for. Environmental aspects, I think I've said, and I think you can see that those perhaps are the most difficult in terms of testing complexity. And once again, you have to rely that these things are properly tested and incorporated in every design. Now, that's perhaps the fun comic. If you look at the other side of the story, if you look at the value proposition, antenna is really the thing that radiates waves and receives waves for your modem or for any type of wireless connection. So it's like a speaker, in my opinion. That's my best analogy in an audio system. It's typically not the most expensive part, but it's certainly the most critical part in making sure that your wireless connection happens, and your wireless connection could obviously be part of a much larger system. So firstly, often the electronics is already more expensive, but if this thing is earning you income, like a credit card machine, or it's protecting some valuable equipment, then one could see that it becomes almost nonsensical to go save money on the most critical part of the system, whereas its actual cost, or the cost associated with it failing, is often extremely high. We know that even installation alone often exceeds antenna price. But this guy here, hopefully with happy customers going through quickly, the guy that uses antenna here may be charging for the transactions, in which case is losing out very badly if these things don't work, and very often customers will just change supplier. They won't even complain about it. Thanks very much to everyone. I'm not sure if Stephen wants to come in, and perhaps we can discuss some of the questions or queries that's occurred from people.
Yes, thank you very much, Andre. It looks like we did not have too many questions, probably because you did quite a good job there. Thank you. However, there were a few questions. Something that came up quite a lot was to send the presentation to everybody. Yes, of course, we will do that. So we'll just send out the presentation afterwards to everybody. Another question that came up was, what are good radiation angles required for vehicle communication? So I think that came from the slide with the police car. Andre, if you can answer that.
Just to talk people through that, if you've got a vehicle, typically you do want a fairly broad pattern, in other words, towards the horizon. Clearly, all the communications you can do is essentially towards the horizon. Now, people say to me, what about a tall building or a tower? What I always say to them, when that vehicle is close to the tower, you almost don't need an antenna. The moment you're about a kilometer away, say, you find that even a tall tower is at about 2 or 3 degrees away from the horizon. So you want radiation towards the horizon, and you want it to vary as little as possible as you walk around the vehicle. Like I said, vehicles specifically are quite difficult because the vehicle itself influences that pattern. But you at least want the antenna to start off being able to cover all directions, and perhaps you will have a bit of a jiggles and waffles as it goes around, and that one do have to live with. But if the antenna starts off not being omnidirectional, of course there's no chance of achieving that.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Another question that came up was regarding the slide where you said you can improve data rates through mounting of an antenna externally. Maybe you can just give a little bit more practical examples of that. Why is that, and how would you mount your antennas? What would you look at? Would you look at a omni antenna, directional antenna, and so on?
If you look at and I'm mainly at the moment talking to people wanting to, say, getting a fixed internet connection where the data rate and so forth is important. We do installations in South Africa of cellular antennas at various frequencies for operators. So we've installed about 5,000 to 6,000, and we've got an online portal where the installer reports each time the signal that he received indoors at the modem, and then what that signal is after he's installed the antenna. That's where that figure that I gave you of about 16 to 25 dBi comes from. That plus the gain. In other words, the first gain that you get when you go outdoors, and it's difficult to explain, but indoors you've got a multi-part situation, so you've got a lot of variation in signals. So it's firstly very unreliable. I think everyone that may have used TVs years and years ago and you had the little bunny ears, remember that as you walk around in the room, the picture will fluctuate. The same happens at Wi-Fi. So with the signal fluctuating, and you're never sure whether your antenna is in the right spot, typically the signal is much weaker, or the signal to noise and the speed that it can connect at. Of course, the signal also needs to penetrate the walls and so forth. So going outdoors is the biggest gain. And then, of course, you can go omni. That's why I often recommend people going omni, because if you go outdoors with an omni that, of course, operates at all of the frequencies, you don't have to align it. Okay, so you can just put it up, and you actually get the largest part of that gain. In other words, you're going to get with an omni about 16 to 20 dB gain. But of course, if you really are in a weak signal area, or it's a critical link, then you can use a directional antenna and should use a directional antenna. So many of the people using antennas are really on fringes of coverage and so forth. And there the directional antennas make a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you, Andre. I think that brings us to the end of the webinar. If I did see another question or two come through, I'll definitely make sure those questions are answered directly with each individual, either via email or we'll get in contact with you in some or other way. And yes, thank you everybody for joining, and please stay online after we end the session just to answer a quick survey. And please feel free to us, even after this, send us an email. You've got the details on the screen at the moment. info@poynting.tech is our email address. And you're also very welcome to visit our webpage as you see there. So,
sorry, Stephen, just a last comment from myself, is that we had to, unfortunately, because not everyone's got all that much time, cover a lot of topics here pretty fast, but there is a Poynting channel on YouTube where most of the topics like gain of antennas, MiMos and so forth are covered in little 2-minute videos. So anyone interested, that's I think quite a useful resource, and perhaps Stephen can also just send people links to these videos should they want to have a bit of a more elaborate explanation on many of the topics covered today.
Good, thank you. Thank you, everybody. As I said, just stay online for the quick survey, and thank you for joining us. We appreciate, and just email us with any questions you should have. Thank you, and bye-bye.